Good morning, everyone. Thank you for staying to day two. I'll echo Rev's thank you for that. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with you guys. I'm going to try to share some things this morning that hopefully will be helpful, not just for the operators in the room, but also for all of you that provide services and solutions for this industry. And I'm going to talk a bit about actually not faster, not cheaper, but better. And this idea of how to prioritize creating better solutions as you think about adopting solutions for your business. So we're going to start with an activity. I need your help this morning. Everyone needs something to write with and something to write on for this activity. It's not like I need your participation, otherwise this isn't going to work. So it can be your notebook that you got when you checked in for Industry Now. It could be a pad of paper. You could borrow something from a friend. But on the screen, I have the design for a wheelbarrow. And what I want you to do in just like a minute, no longer than a minute here, because I got to get on with sharing some other things, is I want you to write down any observations or comments that you have about this wheelbarrow. Any observations or comments at all. Don't overthink it. First things that come to mind. You have a bunch of problem solvers here in the room. Any observations or comments. This will work great if you have like at least 5 of them. You're not going to share them in public unless you want to. You don't have to worry about somebody like stealing your answers. Any observations or comments? Truly, like if you think, I don't have any, write, I don't have any, and then try to think of something. Okay. I'm going to move to the next slide, but you guys, if you want to keep thinking about this, you're welcome to keep writing. We're going to come back to that in a bit. So I want to talk about doing things better. And the first thing I want to do is share a little bit about our journey at Hart House in defining how we wanted to approach using technology to deliver great service and to create a great guest experience and employee experience in the restaurant. For Hart House, delivering digitally on our brand means delivering on the promise to perfect both the guest and the operator experience. So one of the things Hannah mentioned is that I'm pretty passionate about the back of house sort of dishwasher experience, both because it was the first job I had, and also because that's how this whole industry works. We are the largest private employer of people in this country. We have a bunch of them working in food service, close to 10% in hospitality, depending on who you ask. And so our promise is to figure out like how do we translate that brand, which is a very like personal, interactive dynamic that you have with other humans, and have that shine digitally. And so our platform uses that to resolve what I think is probably the most age-old contradiction in restaurants, which is that the customer's always right, but the employee is not always wrong. And so what happens when the employee actually has it right and the customer doesn't? And how do you navigate that effectively and use technology to do that? And just spoiler alert, I don't have an answer. That's a vision statement about like what's going to guide how we invest in technology for our business moving forward. And we want to put everybody in a position to succeed. And so my partner in this, of course, is Kevin, somebody who I think embodies all of these things, which are part of our physical brand and the brand that you get when you interact with him on a human level. For those of you who don't know who Kevin Hart is, he is a comedian, he is an actor, but he's also a business person, an entrepreneur. He owns a studio, he owns a venture fund. He's used that personality and translated it across industries. And our challenge is to figure out how to infuse all of this health and wellness and affordability into the brand. And I think it's really important to start with this. This is the beginning, by the way, of our tech strategy deck for Hart House. And it's not mentioning anything yet about what we're going to do or how we're going to do it. It's mentioning the why and why we're here. And so the inspiration for this and kind of the brand voice that we're going to try to have come through in that is this one of energy and empathy. It's the friend that connects you to the right people, the one that gives you the hookup, the one that sort of like knows when it's the right time to give you the hookup and can manage that effectively, the one who gets you backstage passes or knows just when to share the right thing for you to make an impact. And so for us, step one of creating and navigating this landscape is trying to get clear on what is the sharp idea for a digital strategy at Hart House. And for us, it has to be this rich, human-centered data environment. It can't just be stale. There's a lot of data out there in the universe, but it's not about the data, it's about the inference. It's about the activation of that data. And if you guys heard us talking about it next door yesterday during the cocktail hour, this is kind of what I was getting at, that like humans and data, they can't live in a silo. And so for us, our data strategy is about giving us a full version and viewpoint of each person that interacts with the brand, and to make sure that our partners are integrated into that successfully. And we have to have an infrastructure, in our case, for Hart House, capable of orchestrating that brand with a ton of flexibility. So like our vision, I mentioned yesterday during the CEO panel that we don't have a loyalty provider yet. It's not because there aren't people here and in the community that provide great solutions. It's that we're not quite ready yet, because our vision is how do we do that across Kevin's platform, which is much bigger than Hart House. Kevin has a tequila brand. Kevin has a comedy special. Kevin has a classic car collection. All of these things are kind of part of his brand, and we want to be able to create a scenario where people are clearly interacting with that ecosystem more broadly. And so what that means for us, and sort of my first principle for doing things better with Hart House, is that you have to have a sharp data strategy that helps focus your stewardship in your own business. Now, this strategy is not really reflective of anybody else's business in here, and that's fine. But the point is, you have to actually name and claim that before you get started. Before you even pick a POS system, you have to have something that clearly defines what it is that you're working on. So I want to go back to what I started with today, and I want to just get some, if any of you guys are comfortable sharing some of your observations or comments about my wheelbarrow, I would love to hear them now. You can just shout them out. It's poorly designed. Balance. Hard to dump the stuff out.
I was just thinking, please don't make me use that.
Please don't make me use that. The wheel's in the back. It's a shopping cart. Doesn't have a way to stand still. All good. Yep, keep going. All the pieces are there, but not the right order. Someone's like trying to jump ahead on my presentation and sort of figure out what's going on. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about this. This is actually a very specific design for a wheelbarrow. It's called a daisy barrow. And what it does is it actually travels up and down the side of buildings. You're looking at it on like a profile view, but if you were looking at it along like head on, it's a huge long trough. And inside that long trough is concrete. And so it goes up the side of a building when you're trying to build like very tall skyscrapers and everything else and lay concrete. And it's designed that way with a super short handle and the big wheel in the back, because the wheel kind of like rolls up the side of the structure the same way that like a window cleaning company might be like rolling up the side of one of those scaffolds or whatever. And so this is actually a perfectly designed wheelbarrow for its purpose. But you would probably not be surprised to know that every time I've asked a group of people to give me their observations and comments on this wheelbarrow, it usually sounds very much like what it did in the group today. So being honest with yourselves first. You don't have to like sell yourself out up front. Count the things on your page real quick that you feel like are inherently positive or constructive in nature, and put a plus sign next to them. If anything is neutral, like it's green or looks like a shopping cart, put it like a, I don't know, like a 0 next to it for neutral. And if it's critical or judgmental, put a minus sign. And by show of hands, how many of you in the room had the majority of your comments were positive or constructive? See, I told you I won't look. Okay. How many of you had more critical comments for it? Yeah, me too the first time I did it. Now I know the activity and facilitate it, so I usually get ahead of it. So what I find fascinating about this is that our brains, especially as like operators in the business and even as solutions providers, go straight to like, what's broken, how can I fix it, how can I make it better, which is normal, by the way. Don't judge yourself for that. That's not the point of this presentation. But what's interesting is I showed this to my kids. I have kids that are 9, 8, 8, and 6. What do you think their responses sound like? They're like, that's awesome. They're like, you could put a lever in it, you could just pull it and everything would fall right out the bottom. One of my daughters goes to try to make one with the outside of an applesauce box afterwards. And it's like, I'm gonna make it and see if it works. Through life, like we get further and further and further set in our ways. And that's, again, normal. But I think one of the challenges we have when we think about technology is that we think that it has to look a certain way, or we think it has to function a certain way, or we think that like the coolest, snazziest, sharpest, et cetera, is actually the best solution to a problem, when really, if you have a clearly defined challenge you're trying to solve, which is to carry concrete up the side of a building, you can design something specifically for that that works brilliantly. And it may not have utility elsewhere. And that comes back a little bit to this sort of like what people refer to as the iron triangle. How many of you guys have seen this before, or something like it? Yeah, usually when people publish this iron triangle, it says cost, time, and then down here it says something like quality, right? And somebody's like, you can pick 2, but you can never have all 3. False. The other thing that's false, quality is not the third leg of this thing, it's scope. Quality is what's in the middle of this. And if you mess with one side of that or the other and don't do it in concert with one another, you get reduced quality. So you can't actually move cost and time and scope independently of one another without affecting quality. It is impossible. So there's no such thing as being able to choose quality and choose only one of those things. And to put it differently, the second principle here, and I'll go back actually if you want somebody taking a picture of my triangle here. The second principle for digital transformation for us at Hart House is that you have to optimize the whole, not the pieces. That goes back a little bit to your observation around, like, it looks like maybe all the parts are there, but it's not right in the right way. Any of you guys ever experienced a brand that like looks like they have a bunch of cool stuff, but it's like Frankensteined together? Yeah, that's tricky, right? You can have great solutions, and if they don't work together and the system's not solving a specific problem, the value and the quality is deeply reduced. And so our second principle is really, if you're gonna be working on implementing things in your business, optimize to the whole. And that might mean that you end up designing a wheelbarrow that looks like this, and somebody else could make fun of you all day, but if it gets your concrete up and down efficiently and delivers a great experience for your construction workers, you're golden. This, by the way, is why people still use chits in the back of your restaurant, even if you've got bump screens and other things, because they've decided that that's the best way to deliver a great experience for them and for the guests. You guys heard me mention this a bit yesterday. One of my third principle here is related to this movie, and I don't know if you guys can see this still here, but this is a still from the movie Moneyball. And it's a scene portrayed where Brad Pitt's character, who's Billy Beane from the Oakland Athletics, is sitting and looking over Fenway Park with John Henry, who's the general manager or president for the Red Sox. And the scene is happening because John Henry is trying to recruit Billy Beane to come like manage the Red Sox, and he's selling him on this dream, and eventually he says no. And if you guys know how the story ends, he ends up hiring the guy that did sabermetrics, and the Red Sox win the World Series a few years later in real life. So if any Boston fans are in here, like, yeah. But the other thing he's talking about, since I'm guessing you might be a Yankees fan, judging by that laptop there, this whole exchange is really interesting because he's talking about the difference between the Yankees payroll and the A's payroll. And in this scenario, it's a really interesting point of view. See, Billy Beane used data, but he wasn't the first person to have data. Data was around for a long, long time in baseball before. Instead, he was the first person to have the courage to use it to do things that other people wouldn't do or didn't do. And there's this whole exchange in the movie, and if you want to go watch it, I strongly recommend it. He talks about how when you're first to something, or when you're doing something on principle, you get bloody. You're the first person through the door. People make fun of you. They're like, how come you don't have the coolest, newest thing? And he built this entire team that won multiple pennants, went to the World Series, had a payroll that was like 1/6 the cost of the Yankees at the time. by coming to the conclusion that the best thing for predicting performance in baseball was getting on base. Makes sense. All the other flashy stuff that seems really cool, that's faster or cheaper, isn't better than being on base. Like, the more people that get on base and the more bases they get per at bat, the more runs you're going to score. It's not RBIs in baseball that determine the win, it's all of those inputs. The RBI is just the output of getting on base more often. And when you talk about digital transformation, it's like that. This succeeded for them not because of the analytics themselves, but because the leader understood the assignment and was clear about the mission up front. For me, this is what it looks like for us in restaurants. Using this same example, the Yankees spent about $1.4 million that year in 2005 per win in the season. The A's spent $260,000 per win. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's great, Andy, so what's the idea? We should pay our people less in the restaurant? No. The answer is, like, if you can figure this out in your business, you can get 5 times the amount of wins with the same spend. And that's the thesis that you're trying to solve, especially if you do business in California today. Because you can't not pay people less. You have to figure out how to get 5 times the wins out of them for the same price. And so that is another piece of our digital transformation philosophy at Hart House, which is you play Moneyball and you stay curious. And staying curious is like that wheelbarrow. When it flashes up on the screen, your reaction isn't like, oh man, that's too short, it's gonna tip over. It's like, I wonder what that's telling me. I wonder if there's a way to build something like that for my business that may not make sense for everybody else, but makes all the sense in the world for me because of the clarity in my strategy. I'm going to show you how this all kind of comes to life in a real example. And I apologize if you are a supporter of or employee of either of these two brands. This is not a dog on their brand. I use them both very frequently in my life. But this is a snapshot of a street in University Place in New York, kind of near NYU. And this is, by the way, representative of all of our life in so many ways. Let me show you a few things. Here's Blue Bottle. Here's News Bar, also a coffee shop. Here's Starbucks. You gotta love landlords, right? Coffee, 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 like right next to one another.
My office was on the other, like, right, if you extended this down
Yeah?
right there, and I absolutely walked past that to go to mine.
To go to News Bar?
Every day.
Yeah, and now this is perfect because I'm gonna show you exactly what Rev's experience is and why this is so important in digital transformation. If you've ever been in a news bar like Rev has, you know it is not a tech-driven business at all. And I would argue that Starbucks and Blue Bottle are often cited as people who are like very far ahead in terms of their digital thinking about their business. I hate the fact that landlords will do this to people, right? News Bar, established 94, Blue Bottle not even in existence in 1994, Starbucks definitely not in that space in 1994. But this is what the guest experience is like on this block, and why the tools that you have don't matter as much as the skill you have in wielding them. Very important. The first restaurant there, brand A, we'll call it, this is a recent Google review from the restaurant. 3 stars, worst review you can get on Google, in my opinion. The meh review. Service, takeout. Now why, if you guys have walked this block or you're going to New York sometime, go walk this block and try this for yourself. This is like a prime example. There's no space in either the Starbucks or the Blue Bottle for like conventional like coffee culture at all. They're very much transaction focused locations, which is fine for the brands. Again, like not dogging that in general, but like let's just call it what it is. Food 4, service 2, atmosphere 3. Manager's response to this Google review? You're looking at it. Review number 2. We'll call this brand B. Also from 2 weeks ago, just so you guys can see, these are like recent. I didn't like go back to 1994 to try to like prop up my story. Small spot just for pickup, but geez, too much ice in my drink. You can see my picture. I skipped the picture just for use here. Food 2, service 2, atmosphere 2. Woof. Response from the manager. Hello, I'm sorry to hear about this, but appreciate you sharing your experience. If you'd like additional assistance from our team, please get in touch through our Contact Us page at HT. And then I'll just cover this up. So we're taking a step further in this, but this still doesn't, this feels to me like I bought the shiny thing, which is like an automatic reply to a Google review, but there's no humanity in this. Check out the third. Great place, perfect service. They have the best beer in New York. News Bar also does like bottled beer in the afternoon for snacks and everything. Food 5, service 5, atmosphere 5. Translated by Google, see original in Czech. The manager for the coffee shop, Tomas, thanks for this great review. Enjoy the rest of your time in New York. Anyone want to translate that for me real quick?
Hell yeah. Thank you.
I knew I had you here for a reason, Martin.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. In Czech. Yeah. Wild, right? Like, guys.
I actually know the guy who most likely would do a review.
Oh, you. That's amazing. I promise you I did not know this, guys. I didn't know this is RevSpot. Didn't know that Martin sends people out ahead of time. This is from 2 days ago, though, guys. And Tomas had like a bunch of photos from his visit on the review too and everything else, which as you'll learn about in the panel later today is a great way to jam a bunch of transaction like growth in your Google review side. But like, if there could be a more perfect example of all of this coming together, I don't think I could find it. And I walked by this coffee shop yesterday or Monday when I was in New York, and I took a picture of it, and it was the same thing. A bunch of people sitting out in News Bar, inside and outside, basically nobody at Blue Bottle or Starbucks. And I'm sure they do fine. I'm sure they're paying their rent. But guys, this is what digital transformation has to look like with the humanity in it, core to your values. And it's little stuff like this. It's the stuff that Will Guidara talks about in his book. It's like the translation into Czech to say thank you for coming when it's very clear that he didn't say he was, like it was just auto-translated for him. Wild. To me, this is the best illustration of my fourth and final principle, which is this. There are all sorts of tools out there in the universe that you can use. Many, many great providers here in the room, many of you using a bunch of great things in your business today to help transform your hospitality to a future that looks like it does today and not like it did when Josh Halpern was in 3rd grade. Those tools are just tools, though. If you think about your home life, how many of you have a screwdriver in your home somewhere? If you are over the age of 40, how many of you have had that screwdriver for like 20 years and it's still the same screwdriver? Yeah. If you hand that screwdriver to a mechanic, something gets fixed. If you hand it to a serial killer, someone dies. It's not the screwdriver's fault. It doesn't matter what the tool is. What we need is not more screwdrivers. We need more mechanics. And so perhaps the most important part of your digital transformation strategy, whether you are the recipient of that technology and deploying it in your business, or whether you are selling it to somebody who is deploying it in their business, is you better be building mechanics or race car drivers or rockets or whatever it is that you're building. You better be building the capability in that organization for it to stick, because no amount of tech can substitute for the intuition of that mechanic. And the GMs, the best GMs in our business do this today. They are mechanics. And our job as leaders should be to figure out ways to use that technology to build more and more and more and more of them, so that the adoption is high, the utility is high, the data is good, and the progress can be made. So For me, serving up better is not necessarily about faster and cheaper. It's about starting with a sharp strategy. It's about optimizing your deployment for the whole, not just for pieces. It's about staying curious as you do that and recognizing it's a journey, playing Moneyball and being unafraid to be Billy Bean. And it's about building mechanics, not like swing mechanics or pitching mechanics, but mechanics that can use the screwdriver for good. And if you do that, you may find out in your business that you don't actually need a new screwdriver, that you're cool with that same one that you've had for the last 20 years because it does the job beautifully if the person using it knows what they're doing. So thank you very much for your time, guys. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you, and good luck with the rest of your day.